Hello everyone, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Anindita Marisca with NPM 22,411,036. I will explain about the ownership structure. Ownership structure is an important element in corporate governance because it determines who has power over the company and how that power is exercised. Share ownership does not only mean the right to profits, dividends, but also the right to vote in strategic corporate decision-making. Thus, the ownership structure will affect the relationship between shareholders and management, board of directors, as well as the effectiveness of supervision of management policies. The ownership structure determines the extent to which company owners can control the strategic direction of the company. In practice, share distribution affects who holds decision-making power. Potential conflict between shareholders and management, agency problem, how the company responds to external and internal pressures, including from investors, transparency, accountability, and sustainability of corporate governance. Ownership structures can be classified into several main types. A. Dispersed ownership, owned by many shareholders with small portions of shares each. Commonly found in countries with common law-based legal systems such as the US and UK. Main characteristics: greater management power because shareholders are dispersed and tend to be passive. B. Concentrated ownership, owned by one or a few large shareholders, individuals, families, or corporations. Common in European and Asian countries. Majority owners can exercise direct supervision over management, but also have the potential to abuse power over minority shareholders. C. State ownership, owned by the government. Usually in strategic companies or state-owned enterprises, BUM. The government acts as owner and regulator, so there is the potential for conflicts of interest. D. Institutional ownership. Ownership by financial institutions such as pension funds, mutual funds, and investment banks. Tends to be more professional and active in supervising the company. In many countries, the proportion of institutional ownership has increased significantly. Ownership structure and agency problem. Agency problem refers to the conflict of interest between the parties who manage the company, agent, manager, and the owner's principal, shareholder. In a dispersed ownership structure, conflict generally occurs between managers and shareholders. Managers tend to have more freedom and can pursue personal interests. In a concentrated structure, conflict is more common between majority shareholders and minority shareholders. Large owners can exploit the company for their personal or group interests. Ownership structure affects the design of governance mechanisms. For example, ownership concentration can strengthen supervision of management, but also increases the risk of abuse of power. Institutional ownership usually brings long-term pressure on managerial efficiency and performance. Managerial ownership, where managers are also shareholders, can align the interests of managers and owners, but can also complicate external supervision. Example: PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia, Persero, Tbk. This company is majority owned by the Indonesian government, making it an example of a state ownership structure. In practice, the government has a role in appointing directors and making strategic policies, including determining the direction of investment and expansion. This may bring stability, but also presents the risk of political intervention. In Indonesia, ownership structure and disclosure are regulated by Financial Services Authority, OJK, Indonesia Stock Exchange, IDX, Limited Liability Company Law No. 40 of 2007. Public companies are required to disclose who the controlling shareholders are and how much ownership they have. In addition, there are rules to protect minority shareholders from expropriation by majority shareholders, such as tag-along rights, cumulative voting rights, and provision of equal information. Conclusion: ownership structure is an important component of corporate governance. No structure is perfect. Each has its own advantages and challenges. The most important thing is how the company builds an internal monitoring and regulation system to ensure that decisions taken represent the interests of all shareholders and stakeholders.